Last year, I became the first person to do the Ultimate Explorers Grand Slam, which is visit every country, climb the 7 summits, reach the North Pole and the South Pole, and I just finished that. I think that true empathy, or certainly the way that I can convey my empathy, is to make sure people are maximizing their ability. That's what I believe true empathy is for me. When I broke down climbing Everest, I was not expecting that at all. So I was thinking, like, I'll go up, open this app, I'll make a video for my sister and my nephew and niece and my wife and my mum. Did it, guys, whatever. And then as soon as I got within like 100 meters of the summit, I was just a blubbery mess. My name's Johnny Ward. I'm Irish, obviously. And I recently turned 40, and ever since I graduated from uni at 22, I've lived like a weird life. I left Ireland at 18 and then never went back to Europe. And then I'm a travel blogger originally, and long story, I realized no one from Ireland had visited every country in the world. So then I tried to be the first person from Ireland to do that. And then I did that. And then I had a big hole in my life like 5 years ago. I didn't know what else I was going to do. So I started climbing all these big mountains and running ultramarathons and doing expeditions to the North Pole, South Pole, blah, blah, blah. And then recently, last year, I became the first person to do the Ultimate Explorers Grand Slam, which is visit every country, climb the 7 summits, reach the North Pole and the South Pole. And I just finished that. And then now I've started to create these ultra endurance events because it changed my life doing all that crazy stuff. I recently launched this thing called the Eye of the Sahara Ultramarathon in Mauritania every December. We had the first edition last December, next one's this December. And I just came back from Turkmenistan for another event that I created called the Highway to Hell Ultra Cycle, which is like a 200-mile, 300-kilometer cycle across the Turkmenistan desert to this big burning crater called the Gates of Hell. And that'll be every year. So it's been a wild few years, 15 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, there's a lot in there, right? And I want to start with kind of leaving Ireland and deciding you want to go and visit every country, because look, that's obviously not something that anybody to that point had ever done from the country of Ireland. Why did you decide that you wanted to go and live this nomadic lifestyle and not kind of just follow suit?
Without getting the violins, I had quite a tricky upbringing. My father was in prison, and I grew up on welfare. My mum was depressed after like violent background from that. So I ended up in Northern Ireland, like fleeing that domestic situation in the south. So then we were just broke, and like when other people were going on holidays and stuff, we were just stuck in Ireland. And I just always dreamt of being free. Not so much necessarily visiting every country or anything. I just wanted to be free. We couldn't go anywhere because we had no money. And the thought then of moving from high school to university to a job where you're still basically not free, are you? You can. It's tough to make money. Plus, you only get limited holidays. So I just wanted to be free, both financially free and time free. So I ended up after uni teaching English in Thailand and Korea, because obviously I couldn't do the standard gap year because I didn't have any money. Did this thing actually where you get locked in a hospital in Belfast, do that medical research. I did 2 weeks in this, 4 weeks in this thing where they test drugs on you. And then I used that $2,000 to do an English teaching qualification and moved to Thailand. And that's when I started learning that no one from Ireland had visited every country. And I started a blog to document that journey. And then the blog changed my life, really. That started making money. And then that was way back in 2009, like 15, 16 years ago. And then I never worked a normal job since. That's just been my life since then.
That concept of money and time, because you mentioned that just then about, you wanted to be free in terms of financially free, but you also wanted to be free in terms of time. Do you think one's more important than the other? I guess you can't have one without the other, right?
Yeah, like as someone who grew up on welfare, it's just not romantic, but the money's more important, mate. I know it's so depressing because I've been on both sides of that. I've had time broke, and I've had time now where I'm financially free. And if I had to give up one or the other, I would give up the freedom. I would give up the time, because being broke, truly broke, is horrific.
Yeah. I think as well, you must have, you talk about your childhood and how difficult that was and kind of growing up in that situation. Do you now, and there is a very emotional video on your Instagram, which we'll touch on in the future, when you did finish the Ultimate Explorers Grand Slam. Or no, that was at the top of Everest, wasn't it? That video, I think. and you're talking about, you know, your childhood a little bit. Do you now, when you're on these adventures and doing these hard things, do you reflect back? Like, is that something you touch base on, or is it kind of like you feel like quite far removed from that point at this point?
Well, I'm 41 now, so I mean, it was a long time ago. But also, mate, I'm more of a tough love guy. You know what I mean? Like when I broke down climbing Everest, I was not expecting that at all. I planned to go
Yeah.
up there. I had this sponsor, a crypto company sponsor. Thank God it was at the peak of crypto, and some company sponsored my Everest climb. They've just disappeared now. They give me 10 grand. I had to open up this app on the summit. So I was thinking, like, I'll go up, open this app, I'll make a video for my sister and my nephew and niece and my wife and my mom. Did it, guys, whatever. And then as soon as I got within like 100 meters of the summit, I was just a blubbering mess. So it's not something that I reflect on all the time. The only time I ever talk about it is if I'm doing like media stuff for whatever new thing that I've done. But it's not something that I think I tend to stew on. Although that's a tricky thing to say anyway, because ultimately that's probably what drives me. So even though it's perhaps not something that I'm constantly verbalizing, it is probably constantly there. Otherwise I wouldn't like have this never ending push to do whatever I'm trying to do. But it's not something I sit and dwell on. No, or at least not outwardly.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to that first 3 minutes of the conversation, right? I'm sure everybody can tell you're very much a forward-thinking person. You're like, right, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And like, that must be quite exhausting at a point though, because it's like, you finish one thing and you start another thing. You're like, it's almost, there's that period of satisfaction after each thing, but I would imagine that's quite a short period of time before it's like, right, what are we doing next, Johnny?
Yeah, well, now when I finished the every country thing, that was 11 or 12 years of like constant travel, and I was building my blog and building my income as I was doing it. And then I was expecting that to be like a huge epiphany and wear this gold medal around my neck and bask in the glory of it. And I didn't. I just got depressed straight away and got fat and drinking too much and did it. And so then everything that I've done since then, like the old cliche of the beauty being in the struggle and the beauty being in the journey, I really learned from that dark period post success that I've never had that since. Actually, now I really do enjoy the journey of everything that I'm doing. So like, I wasn't expecting the summit of Everest to be like a culmination of all my achievements. I knew that paying for Everest, training for a year for Everest, doing all the other mountains for multiple years beforehand, that's all equally as beautiful as the summit. And like, it's all these cliches that I think the reason I think they're cliches is because loads of people who've done nothing in their life say things like this. And I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, to tell me what I'm going to feel like. But now I've actually done some cool stuff. Turns out they were actually right. and so for me now, I really do. I don't wait for that crowning moment. I find the enjoyment in the struggle.
When you're traveling that much, looking back at that, you know, visiting every country in the world, is that enjoyable? Like, is it fun?
It's more fun now I've finished.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because then you're just chasing that number, right, at that point.
Up to like 150 countries, it was really fun. And then the last 50 was quite a struggle. But now, like this year, I've been to maybe 20 countries, but I only go to places that I want to go. So it's nicer now.
Because you're not, you know, it's not, I'm going to say forced, right? You were never forced to do it, apart from being forced by the idea that you had started. And like, when you're 150 countries deep, you're never not going to complete the idea. But it must have been just, yeah, it just must have felt a little bit weird in that period of that last 50, just a bit like, oh, I feel like I got to keep doing this. I should be enjoying this, but I'm kind of
And it is also pretty cool too. Like, there are some moments where you're like, when I was in the Caribbean, this is going to sound so grating to people who are grinding out a normal job. I was in the Caribbean, it was 13 countries, and I was on my own the whole time. And I was just thinking, like, this is so boring. Just another bloody beach and another, I was so bored. But then when you're in cool countries, it's brilliant. But then, of course, the two choices isn't either boring or cool. You're also in bloody Somalia and Libya, Central African Republic, like getting shot at or whatever. So there's a whole range of different experiences you're going through.
Was there moments that were pretty sketchy?
plenty, mate. I was just in Libya this year in February in the middle of a shootout between the bloody rebel governments. So, I mean, if you're going to go to wild places and live your life like this, like there's a new wave of people who want to be like social media famous who are doing every country, and you nip in for a day and move on and nip in for a day. They can probably get away without these awful experiences. But if you're doing these mad overland journeys, I spent 2 years in Africa basically without flying to all 54 countries. So that was just mental, like crossing these. And then I went from Bangkok to Belfast by public transport one time. And I went from like this top of Colombia down to Argentina without flying, down to Antarctica actually without flying. So like if you're doing all these wild journeys and not flying and spending years on the road, you just end up in wild situations, some amazing and some not so amazing.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that then, because when you say wild situations, I think people automatically presume negative, don't they? They're like, oh my god, like that's you must have ended up in so many bad situations, but you must have ended up in so many like good situations where you're like, oh, humanity is pretty sick actually.
Yeah, and like people are cool, mate. Like, I went to the South Africa World Cup and I was just out of uni, and I met some like this nerdy computer hacker guy who I'm still friends with now, actually, like 15 years later. And he was staying in the same hotel as me, and everyone was ignoring him, and we took him out drinking with us and blah, blah, blah. And he had created some app. This was 14 years ago, whatever, connected to FIFA. And he was getting all the tickets to every game that he wanted, because it would auto buy the tickets that people had sold back. And the day before the World Cup final, I was with two mates. So it was three of us plus this guy. And he's like, I can just plug in 4 tickets instead of 1 if you want. And we were like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm sure people will sell tickets back. And lo and behold, we had World Cup final tickets for the next day. And then 4 years later, I was in Brazil and I met this guy with one leg who was a teacher of the head of the Malaysian FA. And he knew I was a massive stato football nerd. Like I spent all day on forums and everything. And he said to me, Johnny, if you promise not to sell it, I've got a bit of a surprise for you. And I was like, what's going on? He's like, go and meet this guy at this posh hotel. And he just handed me a World Cup final ticket to the Maracanã World Cup final ticket. He's like, please don't sell it. And I was like, so you get some beautiful experiences too.
Yeah, I think as well, like when you're putting yourself in more situations, those situations are more likely to happen. Again, both positively and negatively, right? But like the more situations you're in, the more likely things that are going to happen, I guess. It's dead. When you just said then, you finished the countries and it kind of led to a bit of like depression, and you put on a load of weight and you just weren't happy in yourself in essence.
Yeah, right.
What was that sort of turning point then to, I'm going to go and do all these huge mountains in essence? Like why did you decide to do that? Because it's not like picking up and running a marathon, right? Or even doing an ultra or an Ironman. This is something that people train their entire life for.
Yeah. So it was 2017 that I finished every country. So it was like 7.5 years ago. And then I was really lost. My business went to shit. I wasn't recording anything. I was kidding myself that I was celebrating, like eating too much, drinking all the time, living in Thailand. I had money saved because my blog had been making good money until I fell apart for those 18 months. So I had money and everything. And I kind of think that I'd kid myself that I was living the dream, but I clearly wasn't. Like, it looked awful. I wasn't sleeping. And then I knew of an Irish guy. I thought, I'm going to go to the North Pole, right? That was what I thought I was going to do. And I can which wasn't actually that great an epiphany, because that was basically just an extension of the every country thing. I was just kind of kicking a can down the road rather than having some life lesson. But anyway, it led to the life lesson. So I'm grateful. I read about this Irish guy. The cheapest way to go to the North Pole was through this Irish guy's company. He's now sold it, to run a marathon at the North Pole. Well, I'd never run a marathon, but I come from quite a sporty background. I went to Loughborough Uni and I played hockey for what was essentially Northern Ireland Ulster when I was a kid. So I always was into sport, but because of the every country thing, it was consumed me for 12 years. I'd kind of got out of shape. And anyway, the cheapest way to go to the North Pole was to run a marathon at the North Pole with this Irish guy's company. So I turned up at the North Pole and I ran that marathon. But I trained for it, albeit in bloody Thailand at 30 degrees, and I got it at minus 30. Actually, that was wild. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how cold it was going to be, obviously. And I was in Svalbard, this island in the Arctic. And then you take this like Russian military jet into the North Pole, and I got off, and I was wearing I was borrowing my mate's ski gear. And because I come from a poor background, I never skied or anything, right? So I'm wearing my mate's ski gear, and I looked like I didn't belong there, and everyone's on all these fancy gear. So then we get into this like emergency tent because it was so cold, and we wait there for like 4 hours eating, and then they put this buzzer on, and everyone's changing into all this sexy high tech cold gear, and they're like, "Johnny, get changed. It starts in 30 minutes." And I was like, "These are the only clothes I have. Get changed into what?" And they're like, "Where's your gels? Where's that?" And I was like, "I don't have anything," but I was fit, and I finished eighth. I think it was bloody freezing, and it was like up to maybe the calf deep in snow. So there was about 80 of us. I finished eighth. Everyone gave me all their gear and their gels and everything. Thank God for them. And then that experience of being out and running, I mean, it was only a marathon, but it was so cold. It was quite an extreme marathon. And I feel like they're really meditative, especially now I've done loads of ultras. When you're in those dark, painful periods, which either it was my first marathon and that's why it was so painful, or because it was so cold, I felt the benefit of going through that horrific, lonely experience and then questioning life and thinking about the mistakes you've made and how you're going to rectify them and the path that you would prefer to be on. And I felt it was really transformative. And actually, I got more value from that experience than I did from being at the North Pole. And then from there, I signed up to climb Elbrus, which is Europe's highest mountain. And then I got back into my running and started running ultras. And then, because I thought training for ultras anyway keeps me fit for ultimately when I was doing those huge mountains. And then that was it, really. I've been doing all that stuff now for 7-8 years. Expedition, mountains and ultras.
It's like hardly any people on Earth, particularly now, can call themselves the first of something. And I think for you, that must be kind of odd to reflect on, right? Because as we've already said, you're the sort of person, even speaking to you for this amount of time, who just continues to take a step forward. You can tell that. So like reflecting on being the first must almost be a little bit weird, but like no one's ever done what you've done. Is that an odd thing or not?
But it's very niche, mate. It's not like everyone's been trying to do it and failing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's still the first. No one's ever done it. It's pretty cool.
I know, but it's not like there was a litany of dead bodies along the way. I think it's quite niche. To visit every country, maybe 1,000 people or something have done it. And then to do the 7 summits, maybe 2,000 or 3,000. So it's two very niche things. It's cool, but it's quite niche. It's not that. If loads of other people had been trying to do it, I'm sure someone would have also tried to do it. There is actually someone trying to do it right now who's reached out to me. He just finished Everest a few months ago, and he'll be the second.
What are you more proud of if you split it in half?
I think the mountains and the poles. They're harder. Because any rich kid could do the countries, and some have. Like there's some blonde chick that did it the fastest to do it in like 3 years. I mean, what are you doing with your life? You know what I mean? You haven't earned it, and it's growing up poor. It's such a blessing and a privilege to be able to visit these places, and then to see people, even to outwardly say you're going to be the fastest to do it. I remember when I was still trying to finish my countries, and I wanted to do it properly, like averaging weeks and weeks and weeks in each country, which is why it took me so long. And then seeing people jetting in from airport to airport and airport, I just felt like it's spitting on the old poor version of me who dreamt of traveling. And these people can do it. And they're just choosing, like, here they are in Federated States of Micronesia, this tiny country in the middle of the Pacific, so beautiful. And they're there for 20 minutes. You know, I find it actually offensive. I find it offensive to me now, but even more so to the poor, younger me.
Well, you're not experiencing what I would imagine you hoped it would be if you're just doing that, are you? It's literally a box ticking exercise at that point if you are just flying in and flying out, and it's
logistics, actually. It's actually quite a big logistic achievement, but that's the end of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the mountains for me is, you know, anybody that has done the 7 summits and the North and South Pole, like it's obviously a famous achievement that, as you say, like a couple of thousand people have done. The idea of even doing that is a big idea. The logistical execution of doing it as well is a huge thing. What was it like getting to the top of that final peak? Like how did that feel at that point?
Well, because it's so expensive, mate, that people always think that you would leave Everest till last because it's so sexy and romantic, right? To be on the summit of Everest, being like, not only am I at the top of Everest, I finished my 7 summits and da da da. And of course, like, I think if you're rich, that is the way to do it. But because it's so expensive, once you can afford Everest, you're better paying for Everest and trying to get to the top of Everest. Otherwise, you might run the risk of spending all your money on other mountains and then never being able to afford Everest, right? So that's why normal people don't do Everest last, because once you can afford it, you need to just take the plunge, because who knows what the future holds. So my last mountain was a mountain. It's called Mount Vinson in Antarctica, which is also really expensive and freezing. And that was nice because when you do Everest or even Denali or Puncak Jaya, like near Papua New Guinea, you might die. Whereas when you do the one in Antarctica, Vinson, it's cold and people get frostbite. Actually, some people lost their fingers on our expedition, but you're not going to die. So you can enjoy that one kind of. It's kind of a nice way to do it, especially if you're fit. You know that 99% you'll be okay and you'll be able to enjoy it. Whereas with Everest, you're scared of failing, you're scared of how much it costs, and also you're scared of dying. So it's hard to enjoy.
Yeah, like it's mad. My partner's never watched Free Solo, the Alex Honnold documentary, and I've been making her watch it. I say making her watch it. We've watched it over the past couple of days, and I was trying to explain to her like that idea of, and that's the extreme, right? That if you make a mistake, you die. But it's even to go into something like Everest, knowing that there is a potential to die, you have to kind of accept that is a thing that could happen, and you're not thinking about it, but you must have it in your head like, I might not come back from this expedition, and that's got to be a very strange thing to kind of try and process before you go.
It's tough, but a couple of years previously, I rowed across the Atlantic in a rowboat, and when I did that, I had to do that. I had to do a will and speak to my family about what to do with my body if it died and stuff. So that train of thought is more like when you're doing something you might die, you have to speak to your family, right, and say like, I might die doing this, and I'm sorry, because it's quite a selfish thing to do. But I had already done it. The first thing, like when I rowed across the Atlantic, you have to sign this thing saying that like they have to let your body, if you die, they have to let your body go because it takes 2 months, and you can't have a corpse on the boat. It's such a grim conversation. So I'd already had that will written and conversation with my loved one. So, and then I'd done other expeditions and stuff since then that I've had to have the same conversation, but it's like still hard for them to hear. But the first time's obviously the hardest, and they'd already heard it. So,
and these things are what make you, right? Like, so your loved ones and your family and the people close to you, they must know that whatever happens, you're going to do this anyway. Like if they turned around and said, like, Johnny, it's probably not the best idea to do this, you might die, you're going to be like, well, I'm going to do it because
yeah,
it's me.
That's true. But my missus, I think we were married or we're still married. I think we'd already been married when I came down from Everest. It was the first time she'd written this ChatGPT contract out saying like, if you want to have kids, well, we have just had a kid actually, then you're not allowed. It was like official legalese thing saying you're not allowed to climb K2, because my plan was to climb K2 right after Everest. And she had obviously thought everything was okay because I'd done loads of mad stuff before, but then being offline on the summit attempt for Everest, she was up like completely freaking out in a way that she'd never freaked out before. And she got all worked up, and she had this contract waiting for me at the bottom when I go back to base camp after summit, and saying like, if you want to have kids, you have to sign this and you're not allowed to climb K2.
I think, yeah, you signed it then, evidently.
I didn't sign it, actually.
This isn't, by the way, this isn't the K2 announcement podcast. We're not doing that. So, mate, we'll go over that because look, there are so many questions that I could ask you about the 7 summits, but there's just so much here. Like you almost can't dwell on each thing for too long. You complete that, you do the North and South Pole. You're the first person to ever do this thing. As you say, not many people are chasing, but it's a very cool thing to say you're the first to do it. The ultimate Explorers Grand Slam. you then, decide to do these races and start these races and kind of get more into kind of the ultra endurance event space, I guess. Why have you done that? Is it kind of like a sharing your experiences with other people type vibe? Like, talk to me about it.
So like just my personality, I'm quite forceful, like I say, and I'm really believe in tough love. I think that true empathy, or certainly the way that I can convey my empathy, is to make sure people are maximizing their ability. That's what I believe true empathy is for me. And I actually believe then that like 2025 empathy, like hyper empathy, is detrimental. I actually don't think it is empathetic to say you tried your best. Don't worry, I still love you. I think that's terrible, unless they have tried their best. But generally, people don't try their best, and it's a like a platitude. Whereas I want people to actually try their best. I truly mean that, not in a cliche term. So with that, then, and how forceful my nature is, like I started doing all these running, and obviously I was doing expeditions, like pulling sleds across countries, or cycling across countries, or running across countries, or whatever. And then anyone in my sphere, like I live in Thailand. Then I was living in Bangkok. Now I'm in Chiang Mai. Like if you're a close friend of mine, I drag people along with me to do these things, right? So then I had all these friends like who used to be never doing anything, and now they've all got these amazing experiences where I can see the change in them, and it's changed their life. And I was like, I need to do this for more people, even though like I know, and I know maybe that like I'm not everyone's cup of tea because it's quite in your face. Try your best, but actually try your best. I know it's not for everyone, but it's who I am, and I could see the positive transformation. Also with my mom, I dragged my mom up Mount Fuji on her 70th. She's had Parkinson's for 13 years, and we do a lot of fundraising. I did a 100-kilometer cycle in a tandem across Jordan with her, and the Serengeti Marathon with her, and then climbed Fuji, all like with her with Parkinson's. And I bring groups of people along to do it with us. And again, I see the transformation in people. The training shifts the weight from them, and then they achieve these things that they never thought would be possible. And I just want to push the envelope and push the envelope and push the envelope. So then I go to Mauritania a lot anyway, because I run like blog trips there. And they have this thing called the Eye of the Sahara that you can see from space that they say is the lost city of Atlantis is underneath, according to Joe Rogan. All right, mate. And I just thought it'd be so cool to run through that to the nearest part of civilization. But I want normal people to do it. I don't want this. What I really think, Ben, is, especially in the Instagram era, it's in people's interests financially, influencers, worst term, but to be hashtag built different. I ran 300K across the Sahara. You're not like me. Hashtag built different, flexing their six pack. You know what I mean? It's in their interest to put themselves away from the general population because they're so cool and so hard and give me sponsorship. Whereas you, who've done a lot of stuff yourself, and me too, I know you're not built different. I know I'm not built different. I'm just someone who made the choice to do that, as could anyone else listening. It's just literally choosing to do it. There's no such thing as hashtag built different. And I want to do the opposite. So I want to bring normal people on these events. They probably don't believe they can do it, and they'll have the worst 3 days of their life doing the event with me until the end. Then they'll finish it and they'll realize that built different is a little shite and that they can do anything. And then it's just the most amazing transformative experience. And then if you can do that, what can you not do? You can do everything. And I want to build it into this big thing where loads of people do it.
The idea that anybody can do anything is something that a lot of people think is ludicrous, but it is genuinely true. Like, no. There are so many people that genuinely can do, if you're able-bodied and you are in good health and you've got a small amount of drive to do something, you can genuinely do it.
Oh, yeah.
It's so almost heartbreaking to hear sometimes when you talk to people about things and they're like, "Oh, I could never do that." You're like, no, genuinely you can. You could. I
was in Yemen 12 months ago. I go to this island called Socotra and I bring my followers with me. It's amazing, by the way. Google image it. It's called Socotra, like maybe the most beautiful place in the world. I think I'm going to start an ultramarathon there as well on the side. But it's not part of the story. There was 2 girls who now come on all my trips that I met there. One from Bahrain and one from Hungary. And now she was just with me in Turkmenistan as well. Anyway, they became friends on my trip. And they were like, "Oh, it's our dream to do a marathon." And then I put them in the same room and ended up being best buddies, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, "Next year, let's do the London Marathon together," which was like whenever, 9 months later. And I was saying to them, "You don't need to wait 9 months to do a marathon." "Oh, yeah, Johnny, easy for you to say." And I was like, "You could do a marathon if you walk it next month, and it doesn't have to be an official event." And then anyway, so I spent a week, I was with them for a week, convincing them. And then 2 weeks after that, they did it remotely on the phone to each other for 9 hours, her and Bahrain. And they did it. And they did the 42K 20 days after I spoke to them. Yes, they walked it, and it's not exactly a Kipchoge time, but they've got a marathon, and no one can ever say that they've never done a marathon. I was like, you don't need to wait 9 months. You know what I mean? You're physically capable of it.
I think most people could, with a little bit of guidance, within a month, cover 42.2K. I don't, just because, if you might feel horrible for days after. Like
Sure.
you're probably going to feel pretty rough if you're coming from nothing going to that. It's going to be horrible. But like the idea of not being able to do it is not true. Like you could do it if you wanted to do it. And I've spoken about this on the podcast a little bit, but that word "want," right? I think that's so important. Like I think you need to want these things, and if you don't want them, or you're not putting yourself in a situation to kind of be forced to want them, if you will, then it's not going to happen. There has to be some sort of desire, and it's like, what builds that desire? Is it the idea of this could change your life? Because I think that is a powerful idea, and kind of something that I think, speaking to you, you kind of you definitely understand, but you also push that message of like, look, do this, and you're going to come out of this a different person.
Yeah. And you love yourself more forever. And the pain, like, again, cliches, but it's true. Like the pain is just fleeting. The pain of training, the pain of paying for it, the pain that you have to go through to get to the finish line, that's all fleeting. But you'll love yourself more forever. And then also, what's next? You can do anything. And it doesn't mean you just run a further distance and then a further distance after that. I mean anything, work, relationships, like self-worth, everything is better because you can do anything.
Mm.
But taking that first plunge is very difficult, scary. I do respect that.
I always think as well, you have these things then forever. Like you've got everything you've done, and as we've been talking, it's like there's this insane amount of stuff that I'm thinking in my head. Like if you wrote all this down, it'd be like a scroll, right? The places you've been, the things you've done, the events you've run, the events you've cycled, the expeditions you've been on, the mountains you've summited. It's like, it's insane. Like, but you have all of that forever. And if you go and run a marathon, you have that forever. If you do an Ironman, you have that forever. Like all of these things, they're actually quite short-term achievements that last a very long time.
I know. But it's why when I see people doing, and I understand if people are hugely overweight, I had an Irish guy who used to be very overweight. Now he's a runner. A funny story about him actually, but I'll tell you after. It's why when people set a goal of 5K and 10K, I try to scoff at it, not because I think 5K and 10K is worthless. I scoff at it because they can set a much bigger goal. They just don't believe it that they can. You know what I mean? If I see a fundraiser for a 5K and a 10K, I don't want to donate. I don't donate to that because I think they're capable of doing far more than that. And I just wish I could put my brain inside their brain for 10 seconds to give them the self-belief that you don't need to fundraise for 5K because you could do a marathon in 3 months, even if you're heavy. My Irish mate.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess for a lot of people, it's stepping stones, right? It's those little things, those incremental to get to that point. But I think it's the idea of everybody has the ability, if they have the desire, to pretty much do whatever they want. And I kind of am speaking to you now, and you hear your whole backstory and everything. You're kind of proof that is something that can happen.
Yeah, and you build on everything. Everything you do builds on what you've done in the past. Maybe this Irish guy, he used to be like a big drinker, and just in 2021, I was worried about him. He's a lovely guy, and I wanted to get him off the sauce. And I was like, let's train for the Bangkok Marathon together. I'll train with you and I'll run your pace. And we did that for like 3 or 4 months. And then the Bangkok Marathon was cancelled because it was towards the end of COVID, 2022 maybe. And then he's like, shit. And we've been training 3 or 4 months, and he had shifted 10 kilos. And I was like, fuck it, let's just go. I'll create our own marathon in Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand in the mountains where it's cooler, 42K. And he's like, all right, sweet. So it won't be an official event. Who cares? And then I was like, actually, why don't we just run from Chiang Mai to Chiang Rai, which are the 2 major cities in the north of Thailand? And I thought it was like 100K, but he agreed. And then we flew up, and then I said to him, actually, it's 160K. And I was like, well, fuck. And then we did it. Me plus there's a third friend who did it with me. And it was actually 199K when we were doing it. And he had never done a marathon before. And we did it. It took like 36 hours. He was crying. His feet were falling apart. And he did it. Absolute legend. He did it. And that was 3 years ago. And he's been running ever since. His life's better. His relationship's better. He's a better father. His work's better. He's actually coming up here next week as well to run with me, and changed his life.
Yeah, these experiences are life-changing, because you go through a year, years of turmoil for that 36 hours. He will have felt like he'd lived for about 10 years.
It was awful, to be honest. It was actually awful, because I hadn't planned it very well. I thought there'd be a 7. I thought, because it wasn't an official event, it was just me and him, and then another mate joined. And like part of it, there's like 35 kilometers that goes through a national park uphill, and there's nowhere to get water or anything. And I don't know if you've ever been to Thailand, but there's a 7-Eleven every 30 meters. It's ridiculous. And there is, but not in the national park. So we had to run all the way through the night with no water for 35 kilometers or whatever. Kind of funny looking back, but like at the time, I'm like, oh, fuck.
You're like, I probably shouldn't have put my mate that's never done a marathon in this situation, but we're here now, so we've got to do it.
It was great. And like and then also like sharing these experiences with people, either strangers who you then share an unbreakable bond with, or with your close friends, that just drags you to a point of friendship that it's like a brotherhood. Like me retelling that story to you when he comes up to visit me now in 2 weeks, like we'll talk about it at length for hours. It'd be so boring for everyone else to hear, but it's so beautiful for us to reminisce.
Yeah, like I can just imagine you boys like sitting down of an evening, just reminiscing about the things that happened, that water story, but I'm sure there are many others as well in that 189K. Like, again, it's that shared experience, like you say, that literally no one else has that. And that's, again, the beautiful thing about these like longer distance races, but anything, to be honest. Like, if it's hard for you, you will have this, is no one will have experienced that thing like you have experienced it. So there's always going to be some sort of kind of personal connection to that thing, even though there is a kind of shared experience of other people having done something similar, if that makes sense. So like, if you do a marathon, you're going to have a different experience of a marathon than somebody else, because it's just impossible to have that same experience. But you've got the relatability of the marathon. And in your instance, like with your mate, it's like you two would have had very different experiences of that journey, but you've got the relatability of that journey, which is so cool.
But nothing does it like running. Like we just did the ultra cycle across Turkmenistan literally two weeks ago. And I've done a lot of ultra cycling, but nothing does it like running then, because nothing I'm talking about ultras and ultras, multi-day ultras. Nothing does it. Like, you don't get the darkness and the pain, like the agony of multi-day or like a 24-hour or 48-hour with no break. The pain and the angst and the stress and how dark and how self-reflective that gets. Nothing beats running. No other discipline can offer what running offers. And that's coming from someone who's done like mountaineering and cycling and swimming. The running offers something that nothing else offers. And I feel like it brings you to so much pain and darkness then that depending on the level of pain and suffering you're going to go through for whatever endurance event it is, the benefit is equally is the exact opposite force. So the fact that running brings you to the darkest, most painful spot, that means that the benefit is also longer and more elation and more self-love at the end, and nothing does that like running.